Hello everyone and welcome to this first video about bash scripting. So in today's video we will start by giving a little bit of an introduction to bash scripting and in general to the terminal environment as a whole. So most of you, I'm sure you've already worked with the terminal, especially if you come from Linux, but if this is your first time in the terminal, and maybe you're watching this video about bash scripting precisely to get more accustomed to the terminal, to learn more commands, stuff like that, then don't worry about it, because this course is basically for everyone, even for people with no prior programming experience, people who have never used the terminal before, everyone pretty much. So with this said, let's now start talking about bash. So when we work, for example, in a Linux distro such as Ubuntu, Mint, or Arch, or whatever other Linux distro, well, what an operating system basically does is it allows us to operate on the hardware of the machine, basically. The establishment of a connection of an interface with respect to the bare metal, with respect to the machine, is actually done by the kernel, which is a particular part of the operating system. So when we work with an operating system, that might be an operating system via a graphical user interface or via, as you can see here, a terminal. What we are doing is we're basically communicating with the hardware via these interfaces of abstraction, which are provided by the operating system kernel. So as I said before, we can communicate with the hardware via the operating system, via both the graphical user interface that most modern operating systems provide, but also via the terminal, also known as the shell. Well, how do we communicate with the computer via the shell? If you've ever used it, then you know that there are some commands which allow you to do some things. If you have never used them, then don't worry, I will explain, for example, each of the example commands that we'll give now, what they do. So, for example, in your shell, you can write a command to create a new directory, a new folder. How can you do that? You can say mkdir and then the name of the folder, for example, example folder, okay? Something like that. Then you can use ls to list all these files and subdirectories inside your current directory. Okay, so for example, now you see we created the example folder, so we can also have this example folder inside our bash directory. Now, if we can also decide to move inside other directories. We can do this with the cd command, which means change directory. So cd, and then we can say example folder, and we can move there. As you can see, we have moved it. We can also move backwards by saying cd ... like this. Then we can also decide, for example, to clear the terminal via the clear command. So by typing clear and pressing enter, we will clear the bash shell. Okay, but all these commands are actually put through an interpreter. This means that how does the computer know what these commands do? And the name of this interpreter in particular is bash. And in this series, we will see how to write scripts that are interpreted by bash. Because yes, as you can see here in the terminal, we can write, for example, commands, individual commands to create directories. Also, for example, you can use touch command to create a file. You can use the rm command to remove files. Oh, right, that is a directory. So, okay, rmdir to remove directories and so on. But what you can also do is, if you have many repetitive tasks to do in your terminal, you can also automate it via script. And a bash script is basically a file that stores a list of shell commands to be executed, starting from the top and ending to the bottom. And that is actually why it is called a script, because the difference between a programming language and a scripting language is precisely that a scripting language, a programming language has a main entry point, whereas a scripting language actually is just run from the top to the bottom. That is on a very level what the difference is, and this is why bash scripting is called a scripting language, even though technically speaking we could refer to bash as a programming language, because technically it is a language that is Turing complete. But let's not go into more in depth about these things, but just know that you can refer to bash as a programming language, as a scripting language, but really it is a little bit more accurate to refer to it as a scripting language. So now that we have introduced what bash scripting is, let's see how we can create our first bash script. So to create a bash script, all we need to do is to create a file with the .sh extension. So now I will create it from the terminal. So to create a file in the terminal, you have to use the touch command. So you can say touch and then the name of your file, and in this case let's call it firstprogram.sh. So the name of your file will be first program, and then sh is the extension for a shell script. So let's do this. And now here I will use Vim as a text editor. And most Linux distros have it pre-installed. So if you type v and then first program.sh, you should have the screen here. If it doesn't show up, then just type nano and then first program.sh, and it will open this other text editor that you will see here. To exit nano, just press Control and then X at the same time, and then you will have exited it. If you made some changes, as you can see, for example, ABC, and you exited it, then it will ask save modified buffer. In this case, you would have to press Y and then enter, and you would have the same result. So in this series, I will use Vim, but you can also use Nano. And well, for bash scripting, really both are fine because we're not going to make super complex programs. So let's start by writing our program. And for our small program, for every bash script that you write, a very important thing that you have to put at the beginning of each script is the famous shebang line of code, and it is the following. So now I will explain what this actually does. So the shebang line of code basically just tells the computer how to interpret this file, basically. So in this way, we're saying, so with this hashtag and then this exclamation mark, we're telling the computer to interpret this file using the bash interpreter that is inside the bin, which stands for binary folder. So what we're saying that everything that comes after this line of code will be interpreted using the bash interpreter, and the bash interpreter speaks the language, because it speaks the language of the terminal. Okay, so all the commands that we used, the bash those commands are basically interpreted by the bash interpreter. So what this means is that we're going to use bash as a language, very briefly. And the first program that we will write, as a tradition for the first programs in each language, will be an hello world program. And so in bash, to print something out to the shell, we use the command echo, which is pretty intuitive why that is the case, because echo means getting the output of your voice back, like in a cave, and then actually, and well, there's also the famous Latin myth about echo, but so if you like Greco-Roman history and Greco-Roman philology, but let's just focus on the meaning. Well, what that means is basically getting something back. Okay, and that is precisely what we are going to do now. So to print something out, we will use the echo command, and then we're going to include what we will print inside these quotation marks. So we will write hello world like this. Now, to execute a bash script, we will just write bash and then the name of our program. And as you can see, we get hello world back. Now let's try to remove the quotation marks. And let's see what happens. As you can see, we still get hello world correctly. So this is a difference between the scripting language of the Linux terminals, okay, so bash scripting and batch scripting in Windows. Because if you included, so in Windows, when you write an echo command, you have to necessarily have to remove these quotes, because otherwise the interpreter will include the quotations inside of the string that is going to be printed out. In this case, on the other hand, bash just ignores the quotations, because actually for people especially that come from other programming languages, might feel a little bit awkward to write strings without them. And so for a lot of people, it's a good practice to just write strings like this in bash. And bash, as you can see, doesn't care, so it will just print out the string like this. But even if we did not include that, we will still have gotten the same result. So in bash, it's really up to you. In Windows, you don't have to include the quotation marks. So with this said, we have seen how to write a simple bash script. We have seen how to execute bash scripts, and in the next video we will see some more commands, some more bash commands, and some more a little bit more complex scripts that we can write.